So I've been waiting to talk about this show, and I will tell you this. Let me just give you a little bit of a backstory here. So I'm upset at myself because I had watched this show way too late, and I'm not just saying this because of the time in which the show came out. Because again, most of you know I'll watch old shows and old movies and stuff, so that's not necessarily the issue. I wish I had watched this show when my paternal grandma was alive. Now, let me tell you why. So she passed in 2023. And before that, she was a huge fan of a lot of crime shows and stuff too. So we were real big on crime. So she liked, Criminal Minds. She liked Law and Order. I think she liked CSI and NCIS. So we talked a lot about that genre specifically. And we used to debate about whether or not Stabler and Benson should get together in SVU because of the chemistry that they had, and it just seemed right. And she was arguing, no, they're partners, and it wouldn't be right or appropriate for them to pursue this romantic slash sexual relationship, whatever. But and so now, what does that have to do with this show? Well, here's the deal. When I look at this show and I see the chemistry between the two main characters on here, it's like, well, they're partners and they work together to fight criminals and to solve crimes and whatnot. So I wish she was still here so I can ask her, what's the difference between the chemistry between Carrie Wells and Al Burns versus Olivia Benson and Elliot Stabler? So I kicked myself for that one. But without further ado, let me get into it. So this show was on CBS and A&E from 2011 to 2016. So the first three seasons were on CBS, and the last season was on A&E, and a lot of that dealt with the um, the declining viewership numbers. Now, I just looked at the numbers, and so when the show first started, the beginning of the first season, it had just over 14 million viewers. And by the end of the fourth season, it was down to roughly around 490,000. So that's a lot. That's a lot. And I'll tell you this. I I read before I watched the show, I read that it ended on a cliffhanger, but I didn't know how big of a cliffhanger it was. I didn't know if it was it the same thing as like One of Us is Lying, Eye Candy, what was the other cliffhanger? The End Game. So, or even like the end of Fast X, and it was basically something like that. Now, I'm gonna tell you what that is, but let's get into this first. And by the way, I should have said this at the beginning of the video. Spoiler alert for those of you who didn't see the show. So, if you don't want to hear the spoilers and you're interested to check out the show, you may not want to finish this video, but you can still subscribe to me and you can still like the video if you want. So, here's what this show is about. Enigmatic former detective Carrie Wells has a rare condition that won't let her forget anything, which complicates things when she is brought in to consult on a case for a team led by her ex boyfriend, Detective Al Burns. Despite her feelings about it, it seems right to be investigating homicides, and she decides to take up the shield again and join his unit permanently. Wells hopes that along the way, the unit will be able to solve her sister's unsolved murder. So, and I think the show had a good cast to it, and I'll talk about the cast in a little bit. So, here are the reviews. Rotten Tomatoes gave it a 40% on the first season. Critics' consensus, quote unquote, more tedious than compelling. The show is yet another lukewarm procedural. The audience score gave it a 41% for the first season. They gave it a 61% for the second season. So I will tell you this. I'm one of these people that I don't always automatically jump on board with, oh, the first season was always the best, or even when we talk about movies, the first movie is always the best. No, it really just kind of depends. For this show, I will say I think the third and fourth seasons were actually the best in terms of the intensity that it brought, a lot of the thrilling scenes. It actually brought more action to it than I would have thought or imagined, especially for a show like this, which is, thought to be as a crime drama, police procedural type show. Now, I will tell you that they did do something that I didn't think they would do. They actually went away from the story of what it all started off with. So Carrie Wells is a detective who she has this perfect memory, like literally a perfect memory. She has a rare condition called hyperthymesia, which allows her to remember any and everything, like any single little detail that she sees or hears, she remembers it and she uses it to help solve the crimes. Now, the first season was based around her wanting to solve the case of who killed her sister when they were kids. So they always showed the flashbacks to when her and her sister played and they were in the forest and she ended up dead. And unfortunately, that case was never solved. And when we went to the second season, third season, fourth season, her sister was never mentioned again. So it almost seemed like the first season and the fourth season were two completely different shows. And I understand that there's criticism on that. Now, here's how Common Sense Media breaks it down. So that's the story right there. Now, Common Sense Media gave it a 40%. The parents gave it a 60%, and the kids gave it a 100%. That was three parents and two kids, which, by the way, why are they letting kids watch something like this? It's not anywhere near as disturbing and dark and gritty as an SVU or a Criminal Minds, but still, me personally, I would say there's no reason for kids to watch this. Now, here's what they say: the concept of a television crime solver with extraordinary abilities is certainly nothing novel. Whether it plays out as a legitimate psychic who uses her gifts to crack stubborn cases, like Medium, or a phony medium who uses mind games to catch criminals, the mentalist. So the only new thing Unforgettable is really adding to the mix is a really long but rather fun to pronounce word, hyperthymesia, which, of course, illustrating the concept of hyperthymesia presents a bit of a challenge because it requires a lot of replay, sometimes painfully slow replay, of a scene in excruciating detail to prove that Carrie, like an elephant, never forgets. But unfortunately, it gets a bit tiresome, and the show itself is ultimately unmemorable. That all depends on who you ask. And I think that there were a number of episodes and a lot of scenes that are memorable. And would I consider rewatching the show? Maybe. I'd say there's a good probably I'm a half and half chance or maybe even a 60% chance I might rewatch this, at least, you know, a couple of the seasons. Let me see. Families can talk about how accurately the show reflects the level of violence in the world around us. Do crime dramas like this promote a culture of violence or merely portray our culture in a realistic light? I think most of it is realistic. And they asked that same question about, these other crime shows. Now, here's where here's where it gets interesting. So let me read some of the reviews on Reddit. And here we go here. Your opinion on the show Unforgettable. One person said this: I'm a fan of cop procedural shows with strong or special lead, Monk, Castle, The Mentalist, Psych. So when I heard about Unforgettable, I grabbed it right away. I finished the first season and started watching the second. The first season is good enough. The support cast has character, but second season is real crap. Another thing is the cases are pretty cool. However, the main character is unbearable. I know some of you may disagree with me, but Carrie Wells is kind of a half-ass cop. She is not fully arrogant like Jane in The Mentalist or very badass and play by the rule cop like Beckett Castle. She is kind of a show off, but in such an annoying way that I can't put my hands on it. Thank you for the rant. And if you have shows like above, I'd love some suggestions. It doesn't have to be a cop show, it just need to be a kind of procedural, like 20 episodes per season. For example, Suits, House. I want something that's badass and interesting, character leads. Um, so in a certain type of, to a certain degree, I agree with part of what he's saying. So Carrie Wells' character is kind of a mixed bag in terms of how the audience would perceive her. So a lot of people would say, yeah, she's real badass, she's real she's smart, intelligent, remembers everything, and she gets right to it. Some people might sit there and say, yeah, she's kind of annoying because she is a little bit of a show off because she's always talking about like her memory and remembering this, and she pulls out random dates. For example, somebody might say, um, what happened on the day of August 21st of 2001. And she'll immediately just say, hey, that's when we went on our third date and you ordered this steak lobster. So, I mean, it was crazy how they did that. And I thought that was kind of humorous. Um, let's see. One person says it started off better with her being flawed. She had some serious behavioral issues like excessive drinking and destructive actions, but they were a side effect of her gift. they ditched it pretty fast, so she just became the gifted one. Somebody says, I forgot about it. It's funny that it ended up being a soft rebooted halfway through. One person says, yeah, it's not a very memorable show. The protagonist is so bad. Somebody said, I forgot what it was about. I think that was kind of a joke because the show was called Unforgettable. Um, let's go on to Rotten Tomatoes. One person says, the star of the show made it more about her than the show. She was obviously trying to take over, purring up to the camera and trying to sex the show or herself up. Totally embarrassing. No wonder it was canceled. I feel sorry for the guy who was actually acting. She spoiled it completely. Another person says, sorry, wrong program. Rotten Tomatoes gave this a 59%. Now, let me get to the part that really, really ticked me off. And again, you guys know me. One thing I hate when TV shows and movies end, especially more so with TV shows, it ended on a cliffhanger. And so here's what happened. In the episode finale, Carrie and Al are having a conversation by the river, and he confesses his love for her. And as she's getting ready to say it, he gets shot by an unseen and unknown assailant. And then he falls down and he appears to, you know, pass out on the ground. And while she's sitting here yelling the same, like, Al, wake up. And she's getting ready to call for an ambulance, backup, whatever. And it cuts to end credits, and that's the end of the series. So that leaves multiple questions open. Who shot him? And did he survive? And they should have done one more season, eke out another season, probably put it on a station that expects less viewership. Maybe I don't know if TBS can handle a show like that, but maybe MTV because you had eye candy there. I don't know, or even put it like streaming only, Prime, Paramount, Peacock, whatever, or finish it out with a TV movie so that we can close everything out. So again, that ticked me off right there, and something told me I was like, do I questioned it. I said, do I even want to watch this show because I read. That there was a cliffhanger, even though I didn't know at the time what the cliffhanger was. But and I think you have a good cast of the show. The Hold on, let me go back to it. I Why am I losing it? Where's it at? I'm sorry, people. This is a little bit sloppy here. Okay, so you have a good cast here. So Carrie Wells, the main character, is played by actress Poppy Montgomery. You have Al Burns, played by Dylan Walsh. Joanne Webster, played by Jane Curtin. Jay Lee, played by James Hiroyuki Lau. Nina Anara, played by Daya Vaidya. Rose Sanders, played by Kevin Rankin. Elliot Delson, played by Dallas Roberts. And Sherry Rollins, played by Tawny Cypress. And then there's a bunch of other people. And we've also had some interesting. We had some interesting guest stars appear here. We had Skeet Ulrich. We had Ashanti. There was a couple others here. You had Boris Kojo. So I don't even know if I pronounced his name right, but overall, I would have to say. So if I had to rate each of the seasons, so the first season I would say gets a good. Um, I would give the first season maybe about a good 7.5 or 8 out of 10. The second season, I would say, gets about an 8. Third season gets an 8.5. The fourth season, I would say I would give it a 9, but then that cliffhanger just killed it. And so I may have to boil that down to 8.5. Overall, I'd give the show a good 8 or 8.5 out of 10, if I'm just being honest. And so I think it was a pretty well done show. I think that, what's the name that directed it? I'm blanking on some of this right now. John Belushi, Ed Redlick, J. Robert Lennon. I think they did a good job on this show. And if you want to watch this show, it's on Amazon Prime. And I don't know how much longer it's going to be on there because you know how these streaming services do it. they'll put a show on there for a bit, then they'll take it off, they'll move it somewhere else, and then have it on there for a bit. So I don't know. I don't know what their plan is. It could be on there for another week. It could be another month, 3 months. I don't know. It could be off by tomorrow. I don't know. So as far as the genre of this show, it's mostly crime drama. You can say crime thriller, police procedural. Like I said, the third and fourth seasons definitely brought some action to it. So um, and yeah, I think that you'll find that character to be a little bit of a mixed bag. Still a good person, all that. I think the chemistry between her and Al was actually great. There was a lot of humor there, and there was definitely some emotional moments. So overall, I'd say it was a good show. I enjoyed it. I would rewatch it, but probably sometime in the near future. But overall, that's that. And if you like this video, subscribe to my channel. I have many other shows on here that I've talked about and plan on talking about. I have a lot of movies that I have to cover. So subscribe, go to my about section, and follow my links to my other socials: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, TikTok. It's all there. So I have more. Stay tuned.